Well, I would not actually say that the past 12 months have been easy. We're still struggling with the war, and we have detractors who are bent on, derailing the revolutionary process, and this has also been a very serious situation for us. But it's been very difficult, but I think we've been on top of the situation for the past 12 months.
What has been your greatest bother? Is it these detractors, the people who were able to escape, the former members of the Momo government which you overthrew, the former president himself, and some of his senior ministers we know escaped out of the country? Are they behind some of the attempts to overthrow you we've been hearing about, like the purchase of arms from Ukraine and the former Soviet Union?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, most of them are, they think, we shouldn't be here, that it was their God-given right to be in power, and that, we should not have been here. So they're going all out to destabilize just what we're trying to do.
Many of ex-President Momo's lieutenants in the APC government could not make it into exile with him on that April 29th day, 1992, when the soldiers struck. The former ministers and party stalwarts were held in this central prison during the Nprc's first year. But on the day Sierra Leone celebrated the Nprc's first anniversary at the National Stadium, Captain Valentine Strasser made this dramatic announcement.
Concerning the fate of the detained political prisoners, government has always maintained that a decision on the ex-politicians will be taken after the completion of the work of the commissions of inquiry which were investigating their conduct whilst in office. Although government has not yet received all the reports of the commissions, as a gesture of goodwill on the occasion of this first anniversary of the April 29th revolution, I am pleased to announce that all the ex-politicians presently detained at the Central Prison, Pademba Road, since the revolution are to be released today.
Within 4 hours of his announcement, Momo's men and one woman were seated in the lobby of the prison, looking well-fed, well-groomed, and obviously delighted. These people stand accused of chasing money and leaving their country to rot, of causing the deaths of thousands by diverting resources meant for the health service, money that could have built many clinics and brought life-saving medicines. By the time they were overthrown, doctors did not even have paper to write on. They are accused of importing jeeps to maneuver the bad roads instead of repairing them. They're accused of being selfish and unpatriotic. Many of ex-President Momo's men are highly educated professionals who were trained in the West. But today, many people wonder how they could have abandoned the culture of refinement in the pursuit of wealth. For their actions lacked any sophistication. As these former APC stalwarts walk to the comfort of their homes, albeit under restriction, there will be plenty of time to wrestle with their consciences. A High Court judge, Mr. Beckles Davis, and his team have been assigned the job of finding out how much money they stole, if any.
What about the war against corruption in Sierra Leone, which is one of the biggest bugbears that you met when you came to power? Can you tell me more about the fight, this campaign, how well you think you've done?
Well, you would agree with me that the fight against corruption is never an ending one. It's a continuous process. You would recall that we instituted various commissions of inquiry to look into the activities of those who were holding public offices. And to date, 2 of the major commissions of inquiry has completed their work. They've submitted their reports, and we've looked into it as a government, and we've taken action, based upon those reports. We think This is a very strong first step in the fight against corruption. The Beckles-Davis Commission of Inquiry, which was looking at ex-politicians, is still compiling, its report, and we hope, to look at it when it will be presented to government, and action will be taken, certainly.
Will there be any prosecutions?
Well, with the Beckles-Davis Commission of Inquiry, when the reports are out, those that guilty would certainly be charged and prosecuted, and those that are innocent would be set free, of course.
Under the APC government, corruption developed into a noble venture, a national pastime. People of all classes and ages who could try something crooked to improve their standard of living did. They took their cue not only from the president and his ministers, but also from senior civil servants and heads of state-run enterprises, the parastatals. In their first year, the Nprc gave another High Court judge, this man, the job of investigating the conduct of these bosses.
Hello? Hello? Who is that? Justice Nylander here.
Justice Nylander did not realize what he was taking on when he began his investigation. He expected to deal with a trickle of fraudulent practices. In fact, it turned out to be a flood.
It was the way of life. It's the same malpractices and deceit, fraud, irregularities, all aimed at making money. You put a man in a position of trust, he abuses it. We've got to name the people who are responsible for these, and where their activities have caused financial loss to the government, we tot up the amount which had been irregularly spent, and then make recommendations how we could go about avoiding the repetition of these ill activities which had gone on for the past 24 years.
If the government is able to recover all the monies that in the evidence that used to you was stolen, was judged to have been stolen from the people of this country and the government and the treasury, what would that amount come to in your estimation? Hundreds of millions or billions of?
Billions. Billions. If you see, it's not just in Leone we have these discrepancies. We have a lot of discrepancy involving pound sterling and dollars, francs. Now, to answer your question, if we were to collect all those monies and convert them to leones, then it will be billions, tens of billions.
So we're talking about millions of pounds and millions of dollars,
yes,
in relation, and hundreds of millions of leones.
Yes, that's right.
Justice Nylander believes that the government has successfully used the detentions, the inquiries, the seizure of assets, and the threat of court action and imprisonment successfully to make Sierra Leoneans break away from the culture of cheating and return to the habit of honest work, honest pay. This, in short, is the moral behind it for all of us.
When you're doing things, they might not catch you this year, they might not catch you next year, but one fine day, they will catch you, and you will be made to answer and pay back.
It is a lesson for the old as well as the young.
Everybody
Realizing the pivotal
The soldiers of the NPRC learned to fight for their survival in the bush before they came to power on April 29, 1992. But once in power, they found new battles waiting to be fought with people whose words or actions appeared to be unhelpful. One group was the press. Under ex-President Momo, a rash of newspapers had appeared in Freetown. In a corrupt system and with a reading public of some 3,000 or 4,000, very small, many of the dozen or so papers were trying to survive. Some did so honestly. Others had to take bribes in return for killing a scandal or promoting dodgy characters. In what was effectively a national crisis, the NPRC was angered by several instances of false reporting from a press that had had so many untrained journalists. In an attempt to get rid of the bad journalistic eggs, restrictions were imposed. All newspapers had to re-register. In order to gain registration, a paper had to have a healthy bank account and a minimum staff of 6 people, at least 2 of them trained and experienced journalists. The press began to choke. However, the NPRC's first anniversary celebration brought a reprieve. Captain Valentine Strasser announced in his speech that restrictions on the press were being lifted.
Public Notice number 25 of 1992, whereby military personnel above the rank of a sergeant and police officers above the rank of superintendent could break into and effect a search on any premises without a warrant, as well as the prevention or restriction of propaganda publications by newspapers. And that is regulations 12, 16, and 17, subsection 1, are hereby repealed.
Those guidelines were basically established, solely with the intention, for us to create a sound, footing for journalism in this country. We have no intentions to muzzle the press at all, and we do not have a desire to curtail press freedom.
The Secretary of State for Information, Hindelo Trai, is in charge of press matters in Sierra Leone.
When people talk that we want to clamp down on media, some of us feel very sad and confused. Because to be honest with you, there are legal means we can do that. Take, for example, for the past 2 decades, most of the newspapers in the country have not paid any tax, business or personal income tax. So what were some of the regulations that are telling us to scrap is that these people should now continue to pay income tax. So if we want to clamp down on any of these newspapers, we could have used any of those legal methods to say, since you have not been paying your tax, then you cannot publish. And also we can even go further by prosecuting them. But we have ignored all that, just to prove to them that we want to bring quality and responsibility. And I'm sure if you interview other journalists, they can tell about the poor quality of our editors and reporters in this country. So it's my responsibility to create that opportunity for them. That is also informing our people, because we believe we and the press are partners.
However, according to one of Sierra Leone's veteran journalists, Sam Short, instead of imposing restrictions by decree, the NPRC could have used a more effective, more conventional method to deal with the press. Several old draconian laws exist in Sierra Leone, he says, that would make life rough for any frivolous journalist.
Can you briefly just list the kind of laws which could be used against the press today in Sierra Leone if it went out of line and did the wrong thing, if it was suspected of doing wrong?
There are at least a dozen of them. You have the Undesirable Publications Act, you have the defamation, you have, of course, libel, you have sedition, you have so many of them. The Public Order Act sort of encapsulated all of these. In addition to them, there was the Public Order Act, which made it easier, for instance, for you to be charged with any of the existing acts in the United Kingdom in Sierra Leone, with the addition that they removed certain procedures in England. The 1965 Act, for instance, in England, you would hardly charge a news vendor for libel. But in Sierra Leone, you can charge a news vendor, you can charge the publisher, you can charge the reporter. Anybody connected with the production and distribution of the newspaper is liable, is equally liable in Sierra Leone.
From a distance, how can you reflect on the relationship between government and press, especially in this first year of the NPRC? We know there was a big controversy which led to Decree number 12. I mean, how do you view all that?
For some time, my personal view, and it is a view shared by the older generation in the press in Sierra Leone, that in the last 5 or 6 years, the press in Sierra Leone has been totally irresponsible. They are no longer interested in news. They are more interested in rumors. Quite a few people who run newspapers have no business in a newspaper office, let alone running a newspaper.
What do you mean by that?
They are totally unprepared, they are totally unsuited, they are totally untrained, absolutely untrained.
Are there good journalists in Sierra Leone today, in spite of all you've said?
Ironically, they are very good ones. But their totality, this is the greatest irony, and it is their totality disqualifies their goodness.
But if sections of the Sierra Leonean community were attacking the image of the NPRC during a national crisis, what with the rebel war and a shattered economy, there were those who were deliberately planning to physically smash the new government and bring back the old one. In late 1992, reports spoke of an attempt by agents of the former APC government to purchase weapons in the Ukraine in the former Soviet Union. The list of weapons being sought was horrifying. This is a copy of the end user's certificate. One plot did go very far. Sierra Leoneans woke up one morning to hear Captain Strasser, the head of state, talk of an exchange of fire the previous night, part of a coup attempt by a group of soldiers and their supporters. The press in Freetown later published a pamphlet and a victory speech, evidence that they were going to turn the country into an Islamic state. The suspects were quickly rounded up, tried in secret, and executed. They included Bambay Kamara, the right-hand man of ex-President Momo. The Western countries were indignant on hearing the news.
That was the most serious, obvious violation of fundamental human rights as far as we got knowledge of them.
As a government, we felt that what we did at that time was necessary for the stability of our nation. Indeed, a lot of protests, especially because of the speed by which things took place, came up from various areas, especially in the international world. And, well, we didn't really, we weren't really shocked with the protests, but we were shocked at the actions that some of them took, especially in light of what they knew had happened in this country all these years, especially in light of the suffering that they knew would befall the people of this nation had the evil plan worked. That is really what shocked us more than the protests.
After the executions of the coup plotters at the end of 1992, relations between the NPRC government and the Western countries became further strained. The United States and Western European nations represented in Freetown formed a coalition and together turned on the pressure on the NPRC to go easy on the press and on the detainees.
Many people, the families of the victims of the human rights policy of this government, came to us, the press came to us, because we, especially the British High Commissioner and the American Ambassador and myself, were considered to be the pillars of the defenders of human rights.
Their concern was heightened by some false reports suggesting that not only Bambay Kamara, but all the former APC detainees had been executed. But the dialogue between Sierra Leone and the West continued. Like two civilized sporting rivals, tempers on either side, if they existed, were kept hidden under a bushel.
None of us, including Britain, has withdrawn any assistance program from this country up to now. Britain only withdrew a promise to assist, but not one program was cancelled or reduced. Our programs, the seat multiplication program, especially the assistance with the National Power Authority, and all our other bilateral programs, which are the largest programs in this country, bilateral programs in this country, were continued.
The people stayed solidly on their government's side throughout this trying period. They empathized with a government that was striving to relieve their suffering, but had to be looking backwards at every turn to ensure that those who caused that suffering were not coming back to impose a new sentence on the nation. Their lives were in danger in the Nprc. The stress was unimaginable. But they had one asset that many governments in the 20th century have grossly underplayed, an asset that never fails. They believed in God. This belief was brought to the forefront of national life during the Nprc. It was Chairman Valentine Strasser himself who led the call to prayer right through this period. And divine help from the Almighty in heaven was never far away. One instance was when the Sierra Leonean rebels and their friends from the NPFL in Liberia thought they had broken the economic backbone of the nation. Having occupied the diamond-rich Kono district, they repelled repeated attempts by the Sierra Leone army to recapture it. But they did not know that prayer changes things.
Mr. Chairman, you're a deeply religious man, if I'm right, and many of your Nprc colleagues, to the surprise of a lot of people, are also religious people. What part has religion played in this government?
Well, you would recall that we declared 7 days of national prayer and fasting, and we think, it was necessary, for the spiritual cleansing of our people, because we had been under, a system that was an evil system, if I would say so. And religion has played a very great part in, guiding our decision-making process. Yeah.
Do you think that the population itself has grasped the importance of this religion in helping the nation itself go forward?
Well, yes. I mean, the response from the public relating to the declaration of those days of fasting and prayer, it was very encouraging, and people realized that it was necessary, because we are going through very difficult and trying times.
And I can remember that just at the end of that week of prayer and fasting, there was some big good news from the war front, because this rich diamond area, Sierra in the Kono district, we heard had just been retaken. And there was a lot of rejoicing even abroad.
Well, in fact, some were saying that that was the turning point.
In the rebel war?
Yeah.
Clear your throats. Okay, so we are going to sing first a Kono song. Ewe Mincha Yam Power Song, that meaning whatever you show, that what you will read. 2, 3, go.
While the NPRC wrestled with the West and its demands over human rights, that infallible chemistry from the laboratory in heaven was working things out. And so, when the moment of reconciliation finally arrived on the first-year celebration, Captain Valentine Strasser not only announced a reprieve for the APC detainees and the press, he went further. He gave a definite date for the return of civilian rule to Sierra Leone.
Based on sustained discussions with the government, we have held discussions with the Advisory Council on the important issue of returning the country to civilian democratic rule. I am now in a position to announce that with effect from today, 29 April 1993, the National Provisional Ruling Council will return this country to multi-party democratic civilian rule within 3 years.
So how do you respond initially to the announcements that we've had marking the first anniversary of the NPRC in power, the announcement of the coming of civilian rule in 3 years' time, the release of the political detainees, most of them, into protective custody from prison, and the reconstitution of the tribunals that have been trying people for crimes against the state?
I welcome the 4 decisions taken by the NPRC government, as pronounced yesterday. I think there are 4 important steps into the right direction. It shows that this government does not believe that they know everything better, but they are responsive. They react to criticism, they react to advice, and we were sometimes in doubt over the last 6 months if that were the case. It is a series of decisions to protect human rights in a better way than they did over the last full year.
There are people who are wondering whether in 3 years' time the people who have been overthrown would not really just wait in the background for the time to pass and return and create another disaster in Sierra Leone, undoing all the good that you, the NPRC, and the people would have done in those 3 years. What do you say to that?
Well, we don't think that those who are responsible for the situation that we're presently confronting should be allowed, to come back into politics. One possible option would be to just say that they should not at all participate in the political process leading to the eventual return to civilian rule.
So ban them like the Nigerians did?
Possibly.
Would also this 3-year period, do you think, be enough to educate Sierra Leonean voters so that they'll be able to tell a patriotic politician from one that is not patriotic?
Well, with the level of awareness, and nationalism, within the Sierra Leonean, diaspora now, we think that 3 years is relatively a realistic time frame.
This decision seems to be a compromise between doves and hawks in the inner circle of the NPRC. Some people probably wanted to return the country to civilian government earlier, and others longer. But I think this is acceptable, a good foundation for future cooperation between the Europeans, who provide more than 70% of all the development assistance to this country, and the NPRC government. So I'm quite happy about this development. It is not 100% of what we could expect, but it is a sovereign nation, and it shows that it is possible to continue our cooperation. So I'm happy about that.
What about this opinion expressed by some people that, having heard the announcement by the head of state and the chairman that Sierra Leone will return to civilian rule in not later than the 29th of April 1996, the 3 years you've allowed yourself, I mean the government, is just too short to be able to get Sierra Leoneans politically educated so that they don't make the mistakes of bringing back to the political forefront crooks and people who mismanage the economy.
Well, rightly so, this has been some of our fear initially. But like we say, within our own capability as a government, we have looked at all the factors to say within this limited time, we can be able to achieve this.
The announcement about civilian rule was a mighty surprise. All along the stands at the stadium, they were asking, hey, these NPRC fellows are supposed to be young, immature and inexperienced. How come they can make these sensible decisions so quietly, without a fight, without any leaks? There is joy in this mighty circle as the dames go marching on. The NPRC had two classes of supporters in their first year. There were those who were totally happy with them. There were those who were happy but uneasy. They were wondering if all was well within the NPRC. In the center of this nagging concern was the number 2 man in the NPRC, Captain Solomon Musa. Saj Musa, as he was commonly known, was vice chairman of the NPRC and for much of the year, chief of secretaries, otherwise known as the Prime Minister. Reports were circulating in Freetown and other places of a growing split between Saj Musa and his boss, Chairman Valentine Strasser. People were saying that some aspects of Saj Musa's behavior were causing concern among his colleagues in the NPRC. That Saj Musa was making more enemies than friends. So, how true were these reports?
You're a man who has prompted a lot of speculation and rumors, possibly because people down there do not know what is happening up there at the top with the leadership of the NPRC. And there's been lots of stories bandied about regarding your relationship with people. Let's go into that a little bit. Your relationship with the chairman, for example. You're the number 2 man in the country, he's the number 1 man in the country, and people have said lots of things. I myself have heard lots of things being said. Clear them up. Has your relationship been cordial all the way between you and the chairman?
Before I answer that question, let me just say, although I don't believe it's any use blowing one's own trumpet, but I want to believe that I'm a very good mixer, and I've known the chairman for something like 9-10 years now. I mean, we knew each other before joining the army, and I believe we are ever strong. The bond between myself and the chairman is ever strong, and I personally believe that the development of this country or the fate of this country depends on, very much on the cooperation between myself and the chairman. And in as much as we took over from the highest of motive, and we actually require to drive this country back to its former glory, I believe we need to maintain the link, and we are super strong, in relationship. So
your friendship is very strong?
Definitely.
Right. And you get on with him quite well all the time?
Very much. We almost see each other every other day because it's just across. Yeah.
People even said that, oh, the man who actually rules the country, and I'm sure you have read stories like that in the international press, that really the chairman reigns, but the man who actually rules is Saj Musa. That meaning that it is in your hands that the power lies, and the chairman is just there as a figurehead and all that. Is that true?
Okay, I'm the deputy chairman and the chief secretary of state. Of course, that clearly tells you that I'm directly responsible for the day-to-day running of the government. With that responsibility, I believe I've been entrusted with an enormous task, and based on that, I believe that is why people are saying that I actually I'm doing everything. But if you just look, the piece of job I'm given to do, yes. And number 2 man in every country. You act as the whip of the country, or the adjutant, as I mean the military says.
Yeah.
But
the impression people trying to give is, from the reports, that you bully the chairman and you get your way all the time, and the chairman only says everything you say. The chairman says yes, yes, yes. You know, because Saj has the power, and whatever Saj says goes. You know, and the chairman has no choice but to agree to everything you say. That is the kind of image that people are trying to give to you. Is that true?
Yes, but I want to believe that people are getting things wrong. Probably it's because I am always in public. I mean, trying to get things firsthand, and because of the fact that I do things purely on the interest of this country. I don't give any room to any personal looks. My concern is this nation, and probably I mean in carrying out my job. I mean, people just misunderstand it.
But in spite of his words, suspicions of a rift between Saj Musa and the rest of the NPRC persisted. The clearest indication of the rift came during the NPRC's first anniversary celebration at the National Stadium. Here on the grounds was Head of State Captain Valentine Strasser, and there, up on the stands, was Captain Saj Musa. That, to many people, was most unusual, because in the first months of the NPRC, Valentine Strasser and Saj Musa were inseparable. They always appeared together in public. On the 5th of July 1993, the NPRC announced that Captain Solomon Musa was being relieved of his duties, both as Vice Chairman of the NPRC and as Chief of Secretaries in the government. This was done, said the NPRC, in the interest of national stability. Again, a problem that could have torn the NPRC apart had been handled with great maturity and no fuss. Soldiers argue with their guns, but the NPRC had come out of its most traumatic problem so far without a shot being fired. As for Saj Musa, he will be remembered as the action man, the man who fostered discipline, who had no room for slothfulness, who put his personal touch behind the campaign to clean up the environment, to get people turning up for work on time, and achieve greater efficiency in the civil service.
Are you a nice man?
Definitely, I'm a gentleman, and I believe I'm nice. As I said originally, I do have friends.
Friends outside the military as well?
Definitely, and I do mix well. So I believe if I'm not nice, I will not have people coming close to me.
Are you a brave man?
Definitely. I mean, that is evident in what prompted us to take over the reins of power from the APC government. APC wrong, April 29th last year.
So anyone who comes close to you will see the real Saj Musa, not those who stay far away, because they might just get rumors which are unfounded.
I mean, definitely. I mean, you can. I mean, see best in this case. I mean, you've seen for yourself. I mean, I'm equally a gentleman like any other citizen, but people just believe I'm a monster, and I don't believe that's the case.
His departure coincided with a reshuffle, which named this man, Captain Mada Bio, as the new Chief of Secretaries. Lieutenant Karifa Kagwe became the new Secretary for Foreign Affairs, and John Benjamin, an abiding inspiration for the revolution, and by all accounts, the most trusted civilian in their ranks, was appointed Secretary General of the NPRC. Valentine Strasser stayed at the helm.
What's your name?
Abubakar Fofana.
Abubakar Fofana. What's your name?
Ishmael Mansari.
Ishmael Mansari. Okay, now, I get 100 Leone. See? 100 Leone? Okay. Would I answer my question at the beginning? 100 Leone, okay? Okay. What's in this country name?
Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone. Okay, but what I talk you for? Answer me loud, you understand? What's in this country name?
Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone. Okay, I don't get 100. Okay. Who are the rule in this country now?
Captain Valentine E.M. Strasser.
Captain Valentine E.M. Strasser. For true? What's in the government's name in Sierra Leone?
Nprc.
What's your name?
Nprc.
Yeah? Who does Sabi Captain Valentine's class? Who don't see him face now? You don't see him face?
Yes.
Now fine man?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, then are two. Okay. Who does Sabi sing national anthem now?
Yes.
Who does Sabi? You Sabi?
Yes.
You Sabi? Who does you Sabi? You Sabi? Who does Sabi? You Sabi? Okay, now sing for me now. Yeah? Sing her. And I know you're a good singer. I will.
Where mother free, grace and lovely and forgive, family united, and family stand, singing the praise of nation land, the grace of our heart and the voices unite, the east and the voices the echo of Christ. Blessing and pleasing, and for the Lord, land that the Lord our Sierra Leone.
Clap. Good. That's good. Okay, now, when I say the man they go on this country, you know what's his name?
Captain Valentine E.M. Strasser.
Captain Valentine E.M. Strasser. Okay. Una like him, that man there?
Yes.
Una like him?
Yes.
What's in do? Na good man?
Yes.
Na bad man?
No.
I see. Okay, where una papa and mama, they like Captain Valentine Strasser?
Yes.
They like him?
Yes.
You mama like him?
Yes.
You papa like him?
Yes.
They say na good man or na bad man?
A good man.
Na good man? Yes. Okay, fine. Good. You're enormously popular. Your colleagues are very popular as well. Your faces everywhere in Sierra Leone. Even the little children who haven't been to school know your name, Valentine Strasser. You're referred to as Excellency, and there is always some pomp going with this. And some people have been thinking, oh, maybe this will go to his head and he will like the power and the glory, which is what most presidents like about being head of state. Do those things impress you? It's all these trappings of power.
Well, commanding so much popularity is not it's not the answer. It's what you can give. Because if people should show so much likeness for you as a person, it means that you are under an obligation to deliver the goods. I am a very steady-headed person, and I look at things objectively, and make my own, personal assessment. I do not allow, the pomp and splendor to drunk me as such, and I always impress it on the minds of my subordinates and colleagues that this government is action-oriented and that we should have the capacity to give in our best, and we should be in a position to satisfy, the wants and aspirations of our people.
Concern for the environment did not flag or falter during the NPRC's first year. Lieutenant Charles Bayo is the man overseeing the action at the Department of Works.
The roads that you've been seeing in Freetown that has been repaired for the past year was done by the Works Department. And with the others, it has been contracted to road constructing companies, which I believe will be doing a perfect job on that.
I mean, I can roughly estimate at least 20 roads have been done since you came to power.
I believe it's more than that.
The supply of electricity was stepped up significantly in the NPRC's first year. These pictures may look disheartening, but the real story is that in a capital that used to be without electrical power for weeks at a time, most people are now assured of power for 3 days a week on average. More of these rubbish bins were installed in the city. In the Law Courts building, the seat of justice, where magistrates and judges used to write their verdicts with locally made tin lamps, electrical power is now in constant supply. Even those who injured their eyes in those dark and dismal dungeons of the building, their offices, will be pleased to see the refurbishments that have been taking place under the Nprc. Attention was also paid to the white elephants. This is the Miata Conference Center. For many, it symbolizes the beginning of Sierra Leone's dive into bankruptcy. At the end of the 1970s, ex-President Siaka Stevens wanted to achieve the ultimate honor on earth, chairman of the Organization of African Unity, the OAU. The only way to get that honor was to hold an OAU summit conference in Sierra Leone. But there was no conference center big or respectable enough to fit the occasion. So one had to be built. It was very expensive business. Business that would set the country back some $100 million. Those who cared about Sierra Leone warned Siaka Stevens not to bother. Those who cared about their bank accounts overloaded the president with visions of the glory of being OAU chairman. Siaka Stevens held the OAU Summit Conference in Freetown in 1980, and he became chairman of the OAU. Thus, he fired the starter's gun for Sierra Leone's economic decline. No other big international conference has been held since then. The Miata Conference Center has been laying idle for years, gathering cobwebs. In the NPRC's first year, the renovation of the Miata Conference Center has begun, thanks to help from the European Community, the EC. Of course, some things did not change in the NPRC's first year. For instance, these cows do not give a damn if Sierra Leone is ruled by the NPRC or by Father Christmas. They will end up in the pot anyway. How does the NPRC measure its performance in its first year in office? The rebel war it was that brought the soldiers to power on April 29, 1992. They were not getting from the APC government the support they needed in weapons, supplies, and morale to fight the rebels and win. Well, the rebel war was still being fought in eastern parts of the country during the NPRC's first year.
Who has been fighting this rebel war in Sierra Leone? Is it just Sierra Leoneans, or have other nationals been involved? Have you any proof of that?
Well, of course, we have proofs, to suggest that, Liberian NPFL fighters were fighting alongside, RUF rebels and bandits. They are not just only Sierra Leoneans, but there are Liberians also fighting alongside these guys. And in fact, most of their logistics and training are coming from, the NPFL forces in Liberia.
Liberia. Yeah. Is it true, as I've learned from some soldiers, that fighters from Burkina Faso have also been captured in Sierra Leone territory?
Yes, in one or two, isolated instances, yeah.
For a while, the news from the war front was discouraging. The rebels were wreaking havoc on villages and their inhabitants and killing soldiers with such unprecedented brutality that, according to one army officer, you had to be insane to stay out there and continue fighting. This is Emmanuel Kabia, a journalist. He went to Kono, the diamond-rich area of the country, at a time when the army was beginning to scent victory. Emmanuel brought back this photograph of dogs eating the flesh of corpses in a dump, the work of the rebels.
One has to, steel himself against all sorts of things, emotions, in order to be able to live in that environment, At one time...
So you're saying you saw a number of atrocities?
Yeah, perpetrated by the rebels against our soldiers and civilians caught in the crossfire in that area.
Can you tell us about some of them?
There are lots of them, but one that that has made an impression that I think I will go with to my grave is on February 18th, 1993, when we went out in the morning, where after having heard that there had been an attack by Monkey Hill rebels struck and killed 8 soldiers, 7 soldiers, including a vigilant girl of about 14 years of age.
A woman vigilante?
A woman vigilante.
Who was around 14 years old?
14 years old, yeah. She had earlier come to me the following and the previous night and befriended me, you know, and she even asked me to take a photo of her. I told her that I was going to take the photo the following morning, not knowing that I was going to find her brutally murdered.
How brutally murdered?
She was impaled with a sharp stick, you know, driven into her person.
You mean a sharp stick was driven into her private parts?
Into her private parts, you know, which reached to her stomach. You know, it was a sight that I couldn't, you know, bear. You know, I had to weep, you know. Thinking of the fact that, you know, I had already met with her, you know, I had become friends with her, only to see her the next day in short situation, you know.
What other horrors did you see?
Well, there was another fellow, Williams by name. He had been my friend, you know. He's a soldier. He too was killed, you know, brutally murdered too, you know. His chest was split open with something like an axe, you know, and his guts were also strewn all over the place. You know, when I saw that sight, you know, I had to get drunk in order to be able to withstand, you know, the other horrible sights, you know, that were constantly being brought forward to us, you know. Really, there are lots and lots of horrible things. And on another occasion, a friend of mine who had been there, you know, he's a reporter, Tatafue Tumoy by name, you know. He had seen other atrocities being perpetrated by the rebels, you know. He says at one stage they came to a place where they found the corpse of a soldier, you know, in ashes. You know, they were made to understand that he had been sprinkled with petrol and, you know, they set fire on him.
While he was alive?
While he was alive. There were, of course, outside Kwedu, I was shown a spot where people were buried alive. Soldiers were buried alive and civilians as well. Like this picture, which I've just given to you, wherein corpses are being eaten by dogs, you know. Some people might have the impression that because it's, the scene is just in the outskirts of the town, that these might be rebels. But that is a wrong impression, you know, to be made by anyone. It is the...
Who are these people in the picture?
These are the corpses of both soldiers, civilians, and even it could be rebels, in fact, you know, because when you go about in Kwedu, you find all sorts of corpses, you know, and in those rebel zones, these are normal things.
You're talking about corpses strewn in the street, lying on the...
About, yes, after the scenes of a war. You know, after a war, you know, after a battle, you find bodies strewn about, you know. Nobody to bury them, you know, except you find vultures and dogs eating, you know,
feeding on the corpses,
you know. At one time, I found a corpse lying, you know, clad in jeans and a t-shirt, you know. The dogs removed, right before my eyes, you know, they removed the clothing off the corpse and started eating that corpse, you know, starting from the fingertips onto the trunk and the head and all this. It was a terrible sight, you know. It's one I couldn't withstand.
You see, the rebels were using all these things, you know, to put fear in the people, and also...
One of the heroes who died during the Kono campaign was Major Kanu, commander of the Cobra Battalion. 2 weeks after the April 29 coup, 1992, and in the company of this Lion of the Jungle, Tom Newmer, Secretary of State for the Eastern Province, Major Kanu had taken me and my crew to visit his men at Nyama. They had made great gains under appalling conditions.
You see, this war would have finished long ago, but the APC government was delaying the move because they were, you know, they were in power. But after annihilating them, I'm sure the war will soon finish.
Everybody agree with that?
Yes. Sure.
This is Liberian rebel leader Charles Taylor, the man who is blamed for the deaths of Major Kanu and many others. Charles Taylor set out in 1990 on a noble venture to unseat President Samuel Doe of Liberia, who had become a tyrant. Charles Taylor and his organization, the NPFL, became heroes. But when the job was done, he refused to give up power and allow Liberians to elect a new president. Charles Taylor could so easily have won those elections because there was a power vacuum in Liberia at that time, and he was a household name not just in Liberia, but in the whole of West Africa. However, with 95% of the country under the control of the NPFL, including the most profitable economic targets, Charles Taylor thought he did not need elections in order to govern Liberia. With every attempt by West Africa's leaders to commit him to an agreement, Charles Taylor stalled and stalled, giving excuses like this one.
People don't go to meetings with intentions. I mean, my understanding of this conference is a conference of Liberians getting together to discuss. And I think all intelligent people getting there should have some concept of an understanding of the issues. And I think it's not a matter of intentions, but we're going to discuss. Right, we at it?
The patience of the West African leaders began to run out. They began to plan the use of force. Sierra Leone agreed to the use of its territory. Charles Taylor decided to punish Sierra Leone for that. He started sending his men, the NPFL fighters, to attack targets well inside the border. And later, he helped to form a Sierra Leonean rebel movement, the Revolutionary United Front, RUF. Fode Sanko, a former photographer in Freetown, became the RUF's leader. Charles Taylor became the RUF's godfather.
What do you think of Mr. Charles Taylor, the leader of the NPFL rebels in Liberia?
I think he's just an intransigent and an impossible man who has very strong intentions to muzzle his way into power in Liberia, and he thinks he could do this by military means, and he will stop at nothing to gain what he wants. And he would not even listen to logical reason, and he forgets to realize that what he's only doing is imposing mass sufferings, to his own very people that he has plans to lead. He's a very selfish man, in my view.
As well as fighters from Liberia, Fode Sanko recruited Sierra Leonean fighters from among the young. Many of them had been idle, suffering from unemployment and other ills which they had blamed on the APC government. Some joined the RUF to settle personal scores and revenge. Fode Sanko was soon telling the international news media that his aim was to overthrow the APC government. Well, on the 29th of April 1992, soldiers of the Sierra Leone army did the job for him. They overthrew the APC government. So why didn't the RUF stop the war?
If you would remember, when we initially came in, we offered the olive branch to Mr. Fode Sanko. And we said that we were open, to dialogue. And we invited him also to put his cards on the table. Well, he went out and said to the international media, that okay, in as much as the NPRC government has succeeded to remove the APC government, but we still continue to maintain, two ministers who were, serving in the former administration.
Meanwhile, in Freetown, Western ambassadors were asking the government of the NPRC to retain the former APC ministers.
We met with them. I myself made recommendations how it might be possible to connect between the new government and the Western nations. From the beginning, I proposed that they kept those three ministers, which I considered the most reputable and incorrupt ministers of the past: the finance minister, the foreign minister, and the education minister.
The former APC ministers soon left the government, but Fode Sanko's war continued.
We don't seem to even understand what he wants. We don't seem even to understand what his demands are. And so it's very difficult for us to start thinking about, inviting Mr. Fode-Sanko to the negotiating table, because it's almost impossible to see just what he is fighting for.
He relied almost entirely on Charles Taylor for medicines, weapons, and tactical advice. How did they keep in touch? Well, letters addressed to Charles Taylor's NPFL were taken by the Sierra Leone Army when they captured Fode-Sanko's main base at Pendembu. 17/9/92. From the CIC, couple Fode-Sanko, RUFSL, to His Excellency CIC Charles J. Taylor, President of the Republic of Liberia, West Africa.